Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Employment Committee. I'm Councillor Stuart Brown, Chair of the Committee. If the continuous fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts, and please assemble by the Queen Victoria statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust's fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Let's start with introductions around the room, starting to my right.
Councillor Simon Bosch, I'm the Conservative spokesman on the Employment Committee.
I'm Darren Sanders, I'm one of the Liberal Democrat representatives on the Employment Committee.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Charlotte Gerarda, Labour representative on the committee.
James Harris, Senior Local Democracy Officer.
Jeremy Underdown, Head of Facilities Management.
Natasha Edmonds, Director of Corporate Services.
Rochelle Williams, Human Resources.
Jane Dodino, Local Democracy Officer.
Lovely, thank you all very much. I've received apologies from Councillor Dave Ashmore. Are there any other apologies people would like to report? No, in which case, members, are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Gerarda.
I'm a member of Unite the Union and GMB Trade Unions.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the first item, minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of November. Members, are we happy to agree these as a correct record? Councillor Gerarda?
There's a slight error. Page 5, I think my husband's not going to be too happy because between the 20th of November and today, apparently I divorced him and married Cal Corkery because I'm down as Charlotte Corkery. So, yeah, my husband better not see the minutes because I'll get in trouble. So that could be rectified.
Jane, if we can have an amendment to that, please. Lovely, thanks. Any other amendments to the minutes, members, or are we happy to sign them off with that amendment in mind? Agreed. Lovely, thank you very much. Moving on to our first item of business proper, members' training update from James Harris. Hi, Cal. Councillor Corker, any declarations of interest?
Apologies for being late. No, just I guess my usual ones that I'm a member of Unite the Union.
Thank you very much. James, over to you for the members' training update, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members may recall that the member training offer, and in particular the member induction programme, was significantly updated for the 2023-24 municipal year, following input from a cross-party member working group. The revised programme has been used following the 2023 and 24 elections, and I'm pleased to report the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. The report before the committee details further refinements based upon lessons learnt, benchmarking with other local authorities and feedback from members, notably the cross-party member training working group, which met to shape this updated programme. Regarding the induction evening, this was felt to remain fit for purpose and a significant improvement over previous arrangements. No changes are therefore proposed. The aim of the evening is to enable councillors to be up and running logistically as soon as possible following the elections. This includes affording councillors an opportunity to return the necessary forms for completion handed to them at the count, receive their laptop and IT login credentials, building access pass, and receive the required code of conduct training. If any councillors were unable to sign the acceptance of office book at the count, the evening presents a further opportunity for them to do so. Moving on to the training, bespoke training for the members of various committees, notably the Planning Committee, Licensing Committee, and the Governance and Audit and Standards Committee, will be provided in the usual manner and well ahead of the first meetings of the municipal year. The wider training programme will be delivered via a blended model, utilising the most suitable delivery method for the topic. This flexible approach is intended to improve accessibility, reduce diary clashes, and help support an improved and consistent take-up. The content of the training has been updated, and new elements include adult safeguarding, health and safety, which includes lone working, something which is particularly pertinent to the role of councillors, prevent, in respect of counter-terrorism, modern slavery, equality, diversity and inclusion, local government procedures and procurement, and a social media guide. The training given by directors about their service areas will receive some of the most significant revisions. Rather than being delivered in person, these will form pre-recorded videos which can be viewed at a convenient time for members and can be watched again as and when required. The training will focus on the aspects of each service most relevant to councillors, particularly those they are likely to encounter through casework. The recent introduction of a new learning portal, on which much of the training will be hosted, provides improved measurement and oversight and in effect creates a training record for councillors. The committee is asked to note the progress made in redesigning the member induction and training programme, endorse the proposed training model for implementation from May 2026 and support the ongoing development work, including the Members Hub and committee-specific training. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James. And just to confirm, the proposed training model we're being asked to endorse is Appendix A, pages 17 to 26, is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Fantastic. Members, do we have any questions, comments, suggestions or feedback, particularly on the proposed training model at Appendix A? Councillor Sanders, I think I saw your hand first.
Thanks. I mean, this is broadly fine, James, as far as I can see. I have two suggestions that we may need to look at. The first is, particularly with regards to social media, is what to do when not I'm tempted to say when things go wrong. It's worse than that. I've seen some stuff on social media that has been reported to Operation Ford, which for those people who don't know is the police investigative mechanism into intimidation, harassment of local councillors. And I would hope that the social media aspect of it, which is being prepared, will take that into account. And also I think it's useful if the HR team actually look at, as well as our own individual groups, look at how we can provide HR support to councillors who feel or may have been harassed and intimidated as a result. I'm mentioning that because more than one has been, and particularly female councillors, which is a particular issue. Charlotte can correct me if I'm wrong on this, which is a particular issue, and it's what pastoral care procedures the council can offer in addition to each individual party and each individual group. I don't know whether that's being considered, but I think it might be useful if it is.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Sanders, for your question. In respect of HR support for councillors, I'll probably need to defer to Natasha, who's put her hand up there. Thank you very much, Natasha. In terms of social media, in terms of you're talking about etiquette and sort of best practice, I'm sure we can factor that into the training that's being given, so thank you for your feedback.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add that we already have guidance available that we can expand on to include for this training. Members can also access some of the existing resources that we have around support, so our employee assistance programme. What we can do is make sure that we signpost that more visibly and more openly to members, because there are existing ways that members can access that support. If that's not widely known, then clearly we can make that more visible and more available to all members. There's also LGA resources that we can signpost members to as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gerardo?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, James, for bringing this to us. I think the suggestion of having blend of in-person, online, things you can do in your own time, online briefing sessions is really good, because I'm pretty sure that most councillors have some other commitment, whether it's caring responsibilities or work, and obviously having lots of things just in person and in evenings doesn't work for everybody. So I think it's really good that there's a sort of blended approach and there's some things that people can do in their own time and from their own homes. Just very much endorse what's previously been said about social media. And I think the sort of flip side of that is trying to encourage new councillors to behave as they should on social media as well, which is the other side that we're obviously experiencing. And quite a lot of council officer time is being spent looking into, which could obviously be avoided. So, yeah, I think all the stuff around code of conduct and how a councillor is expected to behave on social media would be very helpful to emphasise from the beginning, so we can get better conduct from the start. Thank you.
Yeah, completely agree. Thank you very much. Councillor Bosher.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sort of on the same page when it comes to the social media side of it, and also where we can sort of signpost stuff when we're getting harassed. I mean, it's probably largely the lady councillors that probably get it more, but I certainly had somebody that was getting quite offensive, and the emails, and it was coming from member services, they were blithely forwarding on what was offensive emails to me, into the point I got to Peter Bolf and said, hold on a minute, you know, and then the police became involved in that sort of stuff. So I think there's also an element of a wider thing when it comes to safeguarding sort of side of it, just beyond us looking after ourselves, if you like. And I do think that there is a council corporate responsibility to councillors that needs to be taken into consideration there. When it comes to social media, and I'm probably going slightly off-piste here, and I'll give an example. I work for a global company, and I have a LinkedIn profile, which is entirely my work related. You won't find anything to do with anything else on there. It's all to do with my work. But they started going down the line, particularly in the United Kingdom, of dictating what we should and shouldn't do on our LinkedIn profiles. Now, there is a degree of personal responsibility, but it came down to the question, well, who actually owns that particular thing? Now, I've got 2 Facebook pages. I've got my own private one. I've also got a councillor one. And it'd be interesting to know that I could post the most radical stuff under my name, and there's no comeback on that whatsoever, because it's my personal Facebook, my personal views, if you like. So when it comes to, and I think I'm probably going down a bit of a rabbit hole here, it comes down to councillor complaints, because clearly that will fall within this. Could somebody raise a complaint about me, about something I posted on my personal Facebook page? Just for the fact that they knew that I was a councillor, but they wouldn't know it from my personal Facebook page. And I'd just be interested to know what the response to that sort of thing is, because that sort of opens up that portal of I can post whatever I like on my personal page, and there's nothing that anybody can actually do about it. And that would be my view when it came to that. My personal page, you leave me alone, you can do whatever you like, basically. Now, political parties might want to take a view on that, because that's the way it is, and the press might, but I don't think there's anything that Standards Committee could actually do on that. And perhaps just park that there to get a view back, if I could, on that before I carry on.
Yeah, and certainly that's something I know that the monitoring officer has had to deal with complaints coming in from, you know, when you're acting as a councillor on social media, when you're acting in your own capacity. And it is a very grey area, and probably one best suited for the monitoring officer to respond to, unless any members present want to weigh in on this. Any officers present, rather.
No, I think it's fair to say it's an issue that we are alive to as officers, and yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's something that will get the monitoring officer to come back and provide some advice on. But it is the rise of social media, and it is a very tricky area. So I need to acknowledge that.
So James, perhaps in terms specifically of the training programme, worth getting the monitoring officer to, if he doesn't already, to do a very in-depth session on the use of social media as a councillor, and having members be mindful that even if they think they're acting in their own capacity, other people may not see it that way. Definitely worth a conversation with the monitoring officer anyway. Councillor Corkery.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, all sounds good. I think particularly kind of move towards online content for kind of accessibility reasons, and then presumably it'll be there as a resource that you can pull on whenever needed. I just wanted to pick up on one thing, which I think I heard that I didn't really see in the report. But was, James, did you say that there's going to be pre-recorded content and these will replace the kind of in-person workshops that we might have previously done with directors during the induction period?
Yes, that's correct, and that would be able to be viewed at any time and will be available at any time as well.
Okay. So having the online content is great. I just think it might be a bit of a shame to, I mean, I'm speaking personally from my experience. When I was first elected, I attended, I think, all, if not the majority of the in-person director briefings that were offered. And at that time, as a newly elected councillor for the first time, I found it a really useful way of kind of relationship building with those people, which obviously you don't get via e-learning. But also kind of having that interactive discussion there and then about probing different issues and kind of how the council works. So I appreciate directors are very busy people, and of course there's always a kind of, I guess, a cost-benefit analysis to be done of whether it's the best use of time. But I guess I would just, pass on the feedback that I personally found it really useful, and I think it would be a bit of a shame if they were lost altogether.
Perhaps, James, in addition to the e-learning modules, maybe some sort of semi-formal, semi-social evening where all new councillors can meet all the directors, be introduced to them and their roles and get to know them in a face-to-face setting, but without the necessity of like an hour and a half long briefing on each individual directorate could be considered as well. Councillor Bosher and then Councillor Gerardo.
Again, I would agree with Councillor Corkery on that particular point, because I think if you're not in the administration, and particularly since post-COVID, and I think I banged this drum when we had the briefing session on this, the day-to-day interaction between members and officers, that has become a pretty significant disconnect, if you like, and certainly the things like responses to emails, availability and all that sort of stuff is something that is almost completely gone, to the point where I don't think councillors know the key people other than the directors, and I'm sure the directors don't necessarily want mundane inquiries going into them, and the key people beyond that. I think that's something that perhaps needs to be addressed, and it's probably not for this report. Certainly when I joined, or a long time ago now, we had a big thick directory that used to be issued to us, which had all the various people, what job role they actually had, and what their extension numbers were. So you could go to a directorate and think, oh, I'm looking at trees, oh, there's the arboricultural officer, that's his name, whatever. It was a printed directory and it wasn't great, but it isn't helpful the way we actually do it from an online point of view, and I'd be disappointed if everything is going to be starting to be moved to online to the point where that disconnect just becomes exacerbated. The other point I'm making, and it's in 3.10, I notice, and perhaps I'm going back, but I was perhaps a little bit concerned, and I think James might allay it, adult safeguarding new for 2026. We must have done something like that in the past, surely, under a different guise. It's the same with fraud and corruption, equality, diversity and inclusion. Those are three quite significant things, and I'm sure we must have done something in the past, and hopefully James is going to say yes. It's just that, well, are we separating them out? And certainly with the social media one, we have done that ad hoc in the past. I'm sure we've done ad hoc sessions in the past, just not something that's been sort of mandated, if that's the case.
James, would you like to come in on that?
Hopefully offers some reassurance. Yes, some of these are updated and refreshed. Some sessions, as you alluded to, social media, rather than ad hoc, are being built more into the programme rather than something that happens due to some sort of particular need. And fraud and corruption, again, updated as well. So some of these, whilst not new, these are new courses and are fully updated.
Thank you. James or Natasha, would you like to come in on any of the comments that were made since I didn't give you a chance after Councillor Corkery spoke? Are we all good? Okay, lovely. Councillor Gerardo, I think you were next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to back up what Councillor Corkery was saying about some of the e-learning formats. For some things like, GDPR, I think that makes total sense. But for the briefings with directors, I think really they need to be more like online briefings if there's not going to be something. I mean, your suggestion of having an evening event and meeting them is a good way to go, but I think there's obviously quite a lot that can be learnt with back and forth and questioning, which you're obviously not going to get from an e-learning module. So I just think there's some things that will work well with that format and some things that probably won't. So if we can have online briefings, that would be good. I mean, I think I went to, obviously because all councillors are invited to go to some of the sessions, and I did go to some, I think last year, and they were poorly attended, but they were organised at like Monday at 10, when obviously if you've got a job, a lot of people are going to be at work at Monday at 10. So maybe to increase sort of interest, they could be at better times. I know there's no best time for everybody, but maybe over a lunchtime or later in the day. Or you could get the availability from obviously the new councillors once they come online. And I just wanted to sort of add a bit more context in terms of things that Councillor Bosher was raising about the situation in terms of safety, particularly around women. And I think something we should try and sort of emphasise, and I don't know if it falls under social media or if it falls under health and safety for members, it could be both, but really just encouraging new councillors to not have their home address on the register of interest, their public register of interests, because I had mine on there when I was first elected, and within the first 6 months I was harassed at my home by 3 different men, and I had the police involved on all of those occasions, and it was really, really horrible. It was an awful experience, and not something that you know want to experience at any point, but when you first get elected it was really overwhelming and quite horrible. So obviously I had dispensation to have my address removed from the website, and I just think it's really important that all councillors are encouraged to do that. And unfortunately, as has been said, particularly around social media, we are in a whole new world now, and I have seen, you know, where if planning or licensing decision didn't go a particular person's way, you know, comments from residents on Facebook saying, oh, well, where do they live? You know, let's go outside their home and give them what for. And I think that's just a new type of threatening behaviour and abuse that previously wasn't seen. And thankfully, I happened to just see that comment, and then I messaged that particular councillor and said, look, get your home address removed. But it's just awful that we're in that situation, but I just think we need to protect ourselves as much as we possibly can, and that's just one really obvious thing to do that just helps protect us and keeps us a bit safer.
Councillor Bosher.
Yeah, I was just going to come back on that. I think the city solicitor has done that anyway, because my home address was on the website for well over 20 years, and all of a sudden it became care of member services or whatever without me saying anything, probably a year ago, something in that sort of order, which from my perspective it was a little bit irrelevant because everybody knows where I live anyway, but you know, after the event. But I think that is the case now. I mean, it might need clarification, but I think the city solicitor probably took a bit of a unilateral decision to take everybody's names and contact details off the website so that we had that protection. I think that's a sad indictment of the current world we live in, to be quite honest, because, you know, I mean, I still get residents knock on my door, they know where I live and whatever, and it was all about being accessible in your local community sort of 20 odd years ago, but I understand the world has changed and not necessarily for the better.
Thank you. Members, any further... Oh, Natasha, you'd like to come in?
Sorry, I just wanted to just come back on a couple of points. One is that we are now doing some work on member officer protocol, and we're building that into some of our internal comms engagement and training going forward, just to provide some of that clarity to officers. But also just to share that we are participating in some research that is being undertaken by SIGOMA, who are the special interest group of municipal authorities, around abuse and harassment experienced by members and by officers, because we are seeing an increase, and I think Jez will cover it in his health and safety report, but we are starting to see an increase in harassment, particularly of where we've got the data frontline staff as they go about delivering council services. So we are participating in that research, and hopefully as on the back of that there will be some findings that will lead to further actions that we can take to support the safety of members and officers.
Thank you, Natasha. Members, any further questions, comments, suggestions, feedback for James to take away and roll into the report, into the training proposal? In which case, are we happy to note the report and to endorse the training proposal? Lovely, thank you very much. James, you are more than welcome to stay, but I appreciate if you want to make your way out, you're more than welcome to. Moving on, I'm going to ask Jeremy to introduce the Health and Safety Annual Report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is the annual report into health and safety, where we take a look back on performance and data from the previous fiscal year, so April 25 to March 26, and we propose an action plan for work and focus for the coming financial year. Whilst there are some references within the report to the compliance side of things, asbestos, Legionella, etc., the distinction and focus of this report really is on the people side of things, as opposed to the building side of things, which sits within the building services section. So there's a few distinct areas of the report really to draw some attention to. Training data, where we are able to show how many people are undertaking various courses. I think James alluded to in his report the introduction of the learning management system, and that's really strengthened our ability to have some confidence that all of our employees are completing the various training courses that they should be doing. I don't think it's a case that people weren't doing them, but obviously the LMS gives us that confidence that they were. So Table 1 in section 6.2 gives a like-for-like comparison over the last few years, and you can see that there's been a significant increase in our ability to report on some high-level health and safety courses across the organisation. The LMS system, though, also gives us some greater access to wider resources. So we've been able to introduce some further health and safety courses that are available through that portal. And I think the table after the second one, table 2, I think it must be, shows that wider course. And again, you can see that the number of employees taking health and safety courses is significantly increased. The other key area of the report is looking at incident reporting, data and statistics. It's the first full year where we have been able to utilise data from our digital reporting method. We introduced it halfway through the previous financial year. And that explains potentially why you see a kind of increase in incidences over the last couple of years compared to the previous ones. The ability that the digital reporting tool gives us enables us to look further and deeper into trends and analysis. And as Natasha alluded to, really, I've put some particular focus onto a significant number of violent incident reports that we receive both from PCC as a whole and colleagues within education that we support via a traded service model. It's not every school that we report on, and the list of schools that we do provide a health and safety service to is included in Appendix 1. So violent incident reporting is a bit of a catch-all title. So a violent incident could be verbal abuse, threats, anything really that people feel uncomfortable with, really, as opposed to actual physical violence. So, as I think you guys have all alluded to, with regards to kind of sort of social media, training and threats, etc., this is a national issue really, as opposed to a local issue. But we do see a significant number of violences reported. There's some common themes there really, where there's elements of location. So we see higher numbers where you have front-facing services, so particularly within the civic offices. There's clearly some links to particular services, the civil enforcement officers, social care staff that are visiting families certainly are more likely to experience issues of this nature. So clearly going into, whilst we've done some work within this area already and put some foundations in place. There's clearly a need to provide some greater focus and support across the organisation in this particular area going into this next fiscal year. The other area, I suppose, the other area of significance within the report is a review of last year's action plan and a proposal for where we put some particular focus going into the next year, which you can find at Appendix 2 and 3.
Thank you very much indeed, Jeremy. Members, any questions for Jeremy on the report? Councillor Mosher.
Thank you very much, Chair. Jerry, when I look at, I'm looking at table 2, and we've got a number of courses there. This is on, I can't even see what the page is, 30 I think it is. It's all printed across the bottom of the web page. For the relevant people, are all these mandatory courses or are some of them optional?
No, they're not all mandatory courses currently. I know that our learning development colleagues are just beginning to start a piece of work where they're going to place some focus on which courses need to be mandatory for which services. So some of these will become mandatory for certain areas of the organisation, but currently they're not all mandatory, no.
So I'm sort of guessing then that things like health and safety induction for employees would be a mandatory course.
That's correct. Well, actually, health and safety induction for employees is a mandatory course for new employees, but actually in May of this year, when there's I understand the wider review of mandatory courses is to be launched, we're going to actually change that course to be health and safety for employees and make it mandatory for everybody to complete every 2 years.
Right, okay, but it's not at the moment.
It's mandatory for new employees,
New
but it's not
employees,
mandatory
but
for
it's
all
not
employees
refreshed.
to complete. Yeah.
And what about things like the health and safety for display screen equipment?
Yes, that is a mandatory course.
Is that do members go through that?
They're supposed to, yes. It is on the members' learning schedule.
On the members. I can't say I've actually done. I've done it through work, which is why I sort of asked the question. Okay, so, and there are some here that would probably be mandatory for people in specific roles, like working safely with steps and ladders, working at height and things like that, which I'm guessing are mandatory training courses before they do that.
That's correct, yeah, and that's the piece of work that L&D are undertaking at the moment.
How do we monitor that sort of training is actually being treated when they're actually doing that sort of work? I mean, how is it actually enforced and what are the procedures behind that?
I'm going to pass you over to Michelle.
Do you want me to pick up on that?
Yeah.
So at the moment, so we launched, you'll probably remember from previous employment committees, we launched the new learning portal just over a year ago. So that's where all mandatory training is recorded. It's a traffic light system. You get alerts if you've undertaken it. And as Jez said, all of the corporate mandatory training has been run for a whole year now. So we're as up to date as we've ever been and that's for everybody. So the next phase of that work is we're meeting with directors locally to say which groups of staff, what training is mandatory for each groups of staff. So at the moment that's down to the managers locally to manage that. But what we're planning to do is move it over to the learning portal. So if we're told all surveyors must be able to use ladders, for example, then we're able to create a group on there where all surveyors would have that as a mandatory traffic lighted system and we can report on that quarterly.
Sorry, Chair. So if you're looking at something like I pick on working at height and working with steps and ladders, I would have sort of expected that to be some sort of mandatory training before you let loose somebody going up a ladder. So if they're not going up a ladder as they've been trained, or alternatively an untrained person is going up a ladder, how do we monitor that and what do we do with that?
Well, if that would be management decision, we wouldn't know if that was happening essentially, but the manager would be responsible for identifying as part of the induction what's mandatory, and at the moment that's kept, they checklist that off as part of the induction or probation period. What we don't have corporately is a tool that says for adult social care, all of this training is mandatory for these groups of staff, but we will have that in the next few months.
So we don't, sorry,
we'll be able to corporately report
sorry,
on it.
Rochelle, we don't monitor that at the moment.
The managers would monitor that at the moment, so it's up to them to induct their staff as part of the induction process. It would be recorded that you've undertaken it, it wouldn't be reported as mandatory. So we would be able to run a report to say all of these people have undertaken working at heights and the ladders course, but it wouldn't specifically say that's mandatory for that group, but we will be able to improve compliance and governance because we'll know specifically what job roles it's mandatory for. So at the moment it's just on the system and the managers allocate that. So if I had a new starter, I would go through with them and say this is all the mandatory training for your role, and they would undertake that. I can see that. But corporately in HR, we only currently report on corporately mandatory training, but we will be able to insist on knowing what's locally mandatory as well. So we can't report on that at the minute.
Okay, all right. I'm picking on working with height or working with ladders here, I guess, probably because it's something I get involved in to a certain degree. Do we specifically tell new workers then that there are things that they cannot do until they've actually been through the training?
Yeah.
Because if somebody shinned up a ladder and then fell off it and broke their leg and they weren't trained to go up that ladder, how would that sit with the Health and Safety Executive and Portsmouth City Council?
Yeah, that would be part of the induction process. It's similar in ways of to chair a disciplinary panel. We would ask that you either meet with someone at HR or that you've been on the training, those sorts of things. So there are safeguards in place. They're just localised safeguards. What we want is to be able to report that through the central governance route. So and now we've got the system to be able to do so. That's the next phase to roll out.
I think where I'm perhaps going with it, the courses are great when you actually look at them, and I can see it like that. It may well be that we need something that comes back to say, how are we actually enforcing this and how are we preventing non-trained staff to actually do that, so we get to see the whole holistic thing. I mean, because if you look at there's health and safety for fire warden training, so somebody obviously volunteers to be a fire warden and they're trained accordingly, but within that comes the health and safety use of things like fire extinguishers at the same time. So we don't get a situation that was clearly with the Glasgow train fire where somebody decided to use a water extinguisher on an electrical fire, and all of a sudden half of Glasgow's burnt down, which is that sort of training would fall within that sort of aspect of it in that respect. So it might be have a better understanding that we have all these courses, but where's the follow-up, what's mandatory, and what's the enforcement might well come behind that. Because I think we've all been tempted, if we need to get something up high, to shin up a ladder or stand on a chair or something in that sort of order, and that is the very easiest way to end up with a broken ankle if you're not careful, and it's where the liability sits with the City Council.
I think Natasha wants to come in on this.
Yeah, just to build on that on a couple of things. So we've got the learning. So social care, for example, already both adults and children's already have a very mature approach to mandatory training over and above what the corporate offer is. So what we do is take the learning from what they do in that space, and we're looking to expand that across more areas of the council. To support that, we've also got the building management matrix, which I think is one of the actions in the action plan where we're rolling it out in the Civic Office. Once we've piloted it in the Civic Office, we'll then roll that out to all of our sites where people have got building management responsibilities. That matrix identifies all of the training that is mandatory if you're responsible for a building, so that it starts to capture that kind of mandatory role-based health and safety training that you would need to undertake. And that then provides us with more tools and frameworks to be able to monitor and properly evaluate what training is being done and the appropriateness of the training to the role.
I think perhaps it'll be interesting to see how that plays out from sort of cradle to grave, because there is another one there that is interesting. It's health and safety manual handling of loads. And I seem to recollect that when we get the sickness and absent report, there's quite a lot of muscular and skeletal injuries that feature there. Now, they may not necessarily happen in the workplace, but you sort of wonder how that all sorts of feeds in as to how to carry something properly and all that sort of stuff. And so use your big levers or whatever they call it and whatever, sort of done all that sort of stuff. But it's sort of, you sort of look at that and you think some of these, if they became mandatory, it might actually impact on the sickness report at the same time.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Councillor Gerardo.
Thank you, Chair. I had a suggestion and then a couple of questions, if that's all right. So just in 9.1 on page, sorry, it's hard to see because it's overlapping. I think page 36, it says about communications. I think it's obviously very deeply worrying to hear that more of our council officers are being exposed to abuse and harassment, and that's awful and really unacceptable. But I just wondered what the council was doing in relation to having posters saying something to the effect of, you know, we will not tolerate abuse. It's just that I went through our front reception on the way to the council meeting this evening, and I could only find one very small A4 poster that had a poster sort of with that kind of message. And obviously, you know, posters aren't going to be the be-all and end-all of getting people to change their behaviour, but they can be found to be effective. And with my other hat, I work for a transport union, and that's one of the things across the transport networks that workers often ask for, because it just sends a really clear message that the employer is backing that employee up, and you know, that abuse won't be tolerated. So I just wondered if there was a plan to put more posters up, and if we could work with colleagues within the council to come up with, you know, a design that they thought would be powerful. And then the second question was just on 9.2. It says there about engagement with unions and council services has shown a positive response to service improvement initiatives being implemented. And I just had the understanding that obviously as an employer that recognises several trade unions, that we should have a corporate health and safety committee as stipulated in the Health and Safety at Work Act. So I just wondered if we do have one, and if we do, when did it last meet? Do we have the minutes? Could they be shared with us? And if we don't have one, could one be established by the time we have a next employment committee? Thank you.
Natasha?
So the last time we met formally with the unions to discuss health and safety was just a couple of months ago with the Joint Officer Staff Forum. We added it to that agenda. One of the actions for the future action plan is to look at our governance arrangements, and we are actively engaging with the unions around how we implement better governance, recognising that we probably haven't got it quite right, so there's always areas for improvement. The unions have put forward that they have health and safety reps, so we're working with them around how we engage with their health and safety reps specifically rather than more generally, and working with them on how we develop that better governance going forward into next year.
So just to double check then, the committee that Councillor Gerardo referenced as part of that legislation doesn't exist explicitly? Its functions are rolled into that other meeting?
Its functions are rolled into that other meeting, but what we're talking to the unions about is how we create the most appropriate forum without creating lots of bureaucracy. And the focus is on actually addressing the health and safety risks that we have rather than creating a bureaucracy.
For the sake of having a committee.
Exactly, yeah.
Super, thank you. Councillor Corkery.
Thank you.
Sorry, yes, the posters.
We can do that, yeah, of course. We can certainly look at that. I mean, target hardening is one of obviously the things that we have been working on in civic reception, but we can certainly look at some posters to improve that area, definitely.
In terms of the Riddle incidents, I think obviously the report talks about there being 18 in 25, 26. Have any of those resulted in further action or investigation by the HSE?
No, they haven't, no.
Members, any further questions? In which case, this report, I believe, is just for noting. Members, so noted. Lovely, thank you very much. Jeremy, likewise, you are welcome to stay, but I appreciate if you want to head off, you're more than welcome to. So, moving on to the Gender Pay Gap report, and I'd like to ask Rochelle to introduce it, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I think you're well versed at this one before. The purpose of the report is to fulfil our statutory obligations, and the action plan builds on the Council's inclusive working practices. I won't go through every statistic in there, but just to give you a general overview, there is a clear overall improvement in the Council's gender pay gap. From the last report, the mean pay gap has changed from 5.62% reduced down to 4.69%. The area that we've seen the greatest change is the median pay gap, which was reduced from 7.11% to 2.69%. It's important to remember with the median, it's the midpoint rather than the average. So there has been an increase in women in the mid to upper quartile roles. There's been a slight decrease in male representatives in roles at the higher end of the pay scale. And we've had the real living wage increase, which does affect more women generally than men, because it's towards the lower end of the pay scale that are most affected. So it looks at the distribution of men and women across the pay bands. In terms of the bonus pay difference, and just to be really clear for anyone that is listening or watching, the local authority doesn't issue bonuses. Within that category, as we say in the report, we include long service awards, so those who have been at the council for 25 years or more, and one-off honoraria payments. So there's no such thing as bonuses, it's just the language used in the report. There's been a slight change in that, but not anything significant to report. So in summary, there's been some positive movement, so substantial reduction in median gender pay gap. The mean gender pay gap continues to improve. The bonus median pay gap is slightly favouring women at the moment because we've had more women within that category, which overall moves us slightly towards a more gender balanced workforce. The areas that we need to continue to looking at are areas where we have slight decrease in women occupying full-time roles, and this also isn't a direct issue. It may be an issue if that trend continues, because it may hinder longer-term equality. The younger full-time workers and part-time women aged 30 to 39 experiencing the worsening pay gaps, that's generally linked to people on maternity leave or parental leave of some sort. It's the age category that we see there. So that was it, unless there are any specific questions.
Lovely, thank you very much, Rochelle. Members, we are being asked specifically to note the action plan, which is part of the gender pay gap report. For those who want a shortcut, it's page 69 of our document pack. So if there are any questions or feedback specifically relating to the action plan or the report in general? No? You might be getting off lightly tonight, Rochelle. In which case, if there are no questions, comments or suggestions or feedback, members, are we happy to note the report and specifically the action plan? Lovely, thank you very much. Back to Rochelle again for the pay policy statement.
Thank you. Again, this is another statutory report, and we're quite restricted in how we need to report for the paper, but we've given you a covering report to give you a bit more detail. Again, I'll draw your attention to a few key areas. So if we look at senior pay, all senior pay levels have increased in line with the national JNC pay arrangements, and for the rest of the staff, NJC agreements. As I've mentioned in the last report, the real living wage is the area where we've seen the significant increase and will continue to see the significant increase. So in 25 to 26, we saw the movement from £12 per hour raising to £12.60 in May 25. So that's an annual salary moving from just over 23,000 to just over 24,000 per year. And if we look to 26-27, that £12.60 per hour will be raising to £13.45. And then that's the biggest change, because it changes from 24,300 to 25,949. So quite a significant change at the lower end, which does have an impact for this period of reporting. So the lowest pay has increased significantly due to the national real living wage. If we start looking at the pay multiples, the council's required to publish the ratio between the chief executive's salary and the median salary. And our pay multiple has reduced from 6.4 to 6.1. And just for clarity, the table included in the report refers to 6.4. That's because we are unable to do the table until everybody has published their data, which isn't until the end of March. So as soon as we have the new information, we'll revise the table and we can circulate that to members or include it in the next report. But our current pay multiple is 6.1. Median salary increased from 29,655 to 32,061, and the highest to lowest pay ratio improved slightly from 1 to 8.14 to 1 to 8.10. So in summary, the pay gap between the highest and typical employees has narrowed due to the increased median pay. There have been no significant pay policy changes that we've introduced, and we're unlikely to, because of the changing organisational context that we're in with LGR. We don't want to see significant changes until we know what's happening in that space. And that's it, unless there are any questions.
Members. Councillor Corkery.
Thank you, Chair. Rochelle, I know, having spoken to the unions probably a few months ago, so it may have changed since then, but there was some issues being raised about people's pay when they are essential car users, and historically whether they'd had the essential car users allowance included in their pay or not. I just wondered kind of if there's any update on that, what the current position is.
We don't have essential car users at the moment, so this is historic. The unions have asked us some questions around essential car user usage and if we would consider bringing that back in, and for some information historically of how it was removed, which we've had to go back many years and provided them for them. I haven't had any specific queries relating to individuals or their pay and the arrangements about that, but I'm happy to engage with them if there are specific queries. At the moment we're in discussions very generally in terms of the unions feel quite strongly that we should have the essential car user, but it was removed many years ago. I'm happy to circulate the briefing paper that gives a bit of history, because it wasn't something that I remembered, so I had to go speak to Sean Tetley actually, who gave us some of the info. So, but I'm not aware of any specific individual cases around salary, but happy to look into that if that's a query.
Yeah, I guess it would just be useful to know the background and kind of what the position is.
Yeah, I can definitely give you an overview. I can send that via Jane in terms of what the questions were and what we've been able to establish at this point. It was another question that was discussed in the meeting that Natasha referred to. So we have informal meetings with the trade unions monthly, and then we have the Joint Officers Staff Forum where we can raise any issues. And the way that we've left that with them is we've provided info. They were going to go away and look into that more regionally, and we'll need to come back together. But if nothing else changes, it's likely to be something that's teased out as part of the LGR process in any case, because if we look across our cluster, there are certainly differences in how that particular topic is managed. So it will be a live conversation. I just, at this point, don't know if it'll be one that Portsmouth is addressing or if it's a cluster discussion, but happy to keep you in the loop on that one.
Thank you very much. Members, any other questions? No? No? No, lovely. In which case, we are being asked to approve the pay policy statement, which is our supplementary agenda item, and this will be going forwards to full council. Members, are we happy to approve the pay policy statement? Lovely, thank you very much, that's approved. Final item on the agenda then, and it's back to Rochelle for the third and final time tonight, workforce trends analysis.
Thank you. So this is a relatively new report. We've brought it a couple of times now, but it's just to give you a greater insight into what's happening across the organisation. So if we start and look at turnover and workforce stability, so far this year we've seen 12% on turnover and staff retention, which is exactly the same as 2025. So overall, we've had a very stable workforce since 2023. We've seen a slight increase in turnover in housing, neighbourhoods and building services, and that's largely due to a large-scale organisational change process that they had. But corporately across the council, this has been offset by reductions in corporate services and public health, which is why we've remained quite stable. If we look at termination reasons, retirement overtook resignation for career development reasons as the main termination reason, which is quite positive for us in one way, suggesting that PCC does continue to have an ageing workforce, which is linked to our strong pension offer, but also indicates better career development options at PCC, so we're not seeing that as a thematic issue as we once were. We've had a reduction in resignations for dissatisfaction, which is a kind of catch-all, someone not happy, but that's also a positive, and the career development being there, we're really pleased with that trend. In terms of the age demographic, we still do have an ageing workforce, and that will continue for some time, but we've seen a slight marginal shift and reductions in the higher age groups and slight increases in some of our lower age groups, suggesting a slight trend towards being able to engage with a younger population. We've had improved retention of our younger workers, so we can see that when we do attract people in, we have fewer younger people leaving the organisation, which is also a positive trend. In terms of recruitment, as you'll be aware, we've had our recruitment system in place for just over a year now, and the data that we're able to pull from that shows that we've had 21,000 applicants expressing an interest in just over 751 roles. And we can see from that that we are attracting a strong younger workforce, and that was really one of the main drivers for improving the system to improve the attraction of a wider demographic. So we can see that that's happening. The next phase of that work will be mapping it through to see if that attraction is leading to appointments. So that's the next phase of work to see if that's coming to fruition. In terms of employee satisfaction, we've had some really positive improvements in this area. So we can see that the benefits continue to be really positively received. So that's the continuation of the VivUp contract, access to the GP services, lots of online resources, and we have the benefit of having comms and marketing within our directorate, so we can see what's popular, what's getting the hits. When our comms go out, there's a direct trend between our materials being accessed, so that's a really useful resource. We've also seen satisfaction improve in terms of line manager capability, which is brilliant for us because we spent an awful lot of time developing and rolling out the leadership and management program, so that would suggest that is having some impact, which is really positive. We've also seen improvements in training and role clarity, and as Jez and James have mentioned, we've had the learning portal that's been rolled out, and that really is a much easier way to engage with your training needs, and services are using that to be clear of what they expect from their staff, and we can also report on it, so it's a much easier tool for managers to use. Pay satisfaction continues to be a bit mixed, but overall we are rated better than some of our external neighbouring employers, but it is still very much a mixed message there. In terms of the external labour market, national public sector hiring intentions reached record lows in 2026, with unemployment nationally also notably low. And we do still face hard to recruit roles, although we do see shifts in where they are because we've been able to utilise the apprenticeship levy, career pathways, and some of our really hard to fill roles. Specifically, we've done targeted work with children's social care planning, the legal department. You'll see an abundance of new trainees come in, so we've got those career pathways in place. It just takes some time for that work to be implemented to see the rewards of that over the years, and HMBS are probably one of the really positive examples of that with their building surveyor and grad schemes as well. So we've been able to replicate that model across the organisation, and that's certainly where we're seeing the impact. But overall, those are the main points we're going to draw your attention to. If there are any questions?
Thanks, Rochelle. Members, any questions? Councillor Sanders.
Thanks, Stuart. This sort of has the element of the calm before the storm, to be honest, because I regard it as a spectre of local government reorganisation will be coming during the next financial year. We'll know where, if, what we're going. Thank you for that, Chair. I agree entirely. So I just wanted to know basically what sort of work will be done to. I'm going to use the verb reassure staff because I've certainly had staff come to me going, "Am I still going to be in a job?" And I'm telling them I don't know, which is not what I should be doing. But I think it's just being straight with people. So I want to know what sort of work will be done once any announcement that we're going to merge with other councils happens, and then what sort of pastoral work will occur over the first 6-9 months or whatever of that period, because it will be immensely unstable, and people will just worry because they will.
So I will ask Rochelle and or Natasha to come in on this, Councillor Sanders, but just to let you know, I have asked that at a future meeting when it's appropriate, because I'm aware that there is a joint committee of all the different councils in the hub who have specifically been talking about staffing arrangements and hypotheticals here and there and everywhere, and for them to give us a report at a sensible time at some point in the future. So that information is already sort of being planned for, but it's a little bit early days yet. But if Natasha and Rochelle would like to come in on your specific question.
Thank you for that. That's actually quite helpful.
I think it's more once we know for certain that LGR is not going to get cancelled and which councils we're actually going to be going in with, we definitely want to know what the arrangements are and what safeguard measures are being put in place to make sure that our staff aren't disadvantaged by the merger?
Yes, I'll start and Natasha will chip in. There's a huge amount of work that's been underway so far. So in preparation for the communications that should come in the next couple of weeks, Natasha's team in comms have been working with us in legal. We've got a comms prepared for every occasion regarding every outcome and a set of FAQs for every possible scenario, we think, every possible scenario that could be thrown our way. So that's all there and in place, and we have staff sessions set up and arranged for as soon as we receive that messaging. Outside of the communicating to staff, we've expanding on our leadership and management offer. We're creating, in conjunction with comms and change and marketing team, we're creating the change and resilience hub. So there will be a hub on our SharePoint system with a huge range of resources available for staff and managers to tap into. Some of those existing, some of those extended, and some of them brand new in how to deal with change, how to be resilient, what support's available. For both managers and staff. It's a really, really tricky one to develop because people will be in different stages at very different times. So there are some people who are already in the what's happening with my job and want to know, and there are others who are completely oblivious and will continue working in their roles and they're not asking any questions. So we don't want to overly scare people and sort of kind of drip everyone through the same training. We want a range of resources that can be tapped into when the manager or the staff feel that that's appropriate. So it won't be that you have to go through sequentially. It will be bite-sized, that you can tap into it as and when needed. So all of that is already underway. In terms of the next phase of work, we're already meeting with some of our clusters informally, relationship building, and looking at what we could put in place once we know what the options are. For support, especially in the first instance for the tiers 1 to 3, because those are the tiers that will sequentially be directly affected and then move on to staff. So there's a huge amount of work in place already, and what we're trying to build on is good practice anyway. So we had the leadership and management offer, not all of our managers, but the majority of our managers have been through that. We have all of our training, so it's just building on that kind of coaching style, the change and resilience, as well, and continuing our work with our external suppliers such as VivUp, the EAP service, and how we can continue to look after staff in a very broad way. But it is tricky conversations because we can't give absolute certainty. We can say most, or we can't say all, so we're just having to navigate through that. But we're doing that with our cluster as best we can. So we've got staff that work across more than one local authority, and we've certainly got staff that know lots of people, so trying to keep the messaging kind of thematic and similar, but also retaining our unique identities, because what language our staff are used to would be very different to how Fair and Gospel or Haven't engaged with their staff, for example.
I think you covered pretty much everything. I think the only thing I would add is that we do actually have a plan for day 1, comms 1, day 1, comms 2, day 1, comms 3. So we've actually got a plan that sets out all of the different stakeholder groups that need to be communicated with. I just wanted to add that members are part of that plan. It's because it's really important that everybody, including you as members, are cited on exactly what the outcome is when we get that information. And you heard it here first, is very important. The focus very much for the planning that we are doing is making sure that residents can still get the services that they rely on. That's what we need to do, and our messaging is very much on continuing to deliver the services that our residents rely on from us as a council. So, and making sure that our staff remain resilient throughout this process. We do recognise it's going to be quite turbulent and demanding if it goes ahead.
Natasha, you have mastered the art of the understatement. Councillor Sanders.
Yes, a career in the Foreign Office beckons, I think, on that basis. And I'm sorry to sort of, chuck 37 litres of cold water on what is actually a very good report. Because if we're actually having reductions in terms of, you're going because you're falling out with your manager, or you're going because you don't like the organisation, or you're going for personal reasons. This is really good progress. And I don't want, it sounds as if we're sort of saying, well, no, don't worry about all that, we're not here in 2 years. But actually, if we can get some of these principles in place for whatever may emerge, then that would be very helpful, because there's some really good work going on in here. And actually, you know, I hope we can continue on our own. But that may not happen, and if it doesn't happen, then we've got to try and get the right principles in place. But we have to be realistic, especially with the staff, because, you know, we owe it to them to try and make sure that everything is as secure as it can be, knowing that job losses and building losses are an inevitable part and have been factored into the costs of all this. But I wouldn't want it to happen, because this is good work. So thank you and well done.
Thank you. Natasha, to what degree do you think it's fair to say that it's really important that we maintain best practice as much as possible, because in whatever new arrangement ends up coming out of the fallout of LGR, if the other councils don't have a procedure for XYZ and we've got a gold standard, the easiest thing to happen is just that the new authority adopts the gold standard that we've been using?
I think it's fair to say that we're already working with the cluster and developing those relationships. Important to recognise that there will be some things that we do very, very well. There will be some things that others in the cluster do better than we do. So the purpose of building those relationships is also to understand where those benefits are, so that whatever we do, we adopt the best of all of it. We are not seeing this as in any way as anything other than a partnership of equals, and just because we are perhaps larger in the cluster doesn't necessarily mean that we are the lead. We are very much working collaboratively and drawing on the best of everything where possible, and in the spirit of collaboration, sharing where it makes sense to do so, because to do otherwise could potentially be a vast waste of taxpayers' money. So, you know, that's also at the forefront of our minds, is making sure that we are as efficient in this as we possibly can be. But yes, I mean, we have got really good employee engagement. I think the data, as you've said, and thank you for that, demonstrates all the excellent work that's been going on. Culture is really important, and it's really vital. And I know Natalie, as our Chief Exec, is very keen to make sure that culturally we maintain the best employee experience and employee engagement that we can, because that translates into good service delivery, which is what we're here to do.
Thanks very much. Members, any other questions, or are we happy to note the report? Lovely, the report is noted. That's the end of the formal agenda for today. Members, today was our final meeting of this municipal year, so I'd just like to take a moment to say thank you all very much for your participation and your interrogative questions over the last few months. Thank you to all the officers for their hard work and detailed reports and for putting up with said questions. Particularly thanks to Natasha and Rochelle, who have been our stalwarts in reporting, and special thanks to Jane for keeping us all organised and on track. Hopefully see you all again after the elections next municipal year. Thank you very much. No, I just said Jane. No, it's a Jane. So meeting is